The skeleton of what had once been a German shepherd lay motionless in the rusted cage. Ribs protruded like the bars that imprisoned him. His once proud coat now patchy and dull. Only his eyes one amber. One clouded with the milky haze of an old injury betrayed that life still clung to this broken creature. They tracked the movement of the man approaching with a pole and noose. "This one's next," the man called over his shoulder. "Doubt we'll get much use from him, skinny as he is." In the dog's fading consciousness, sirens wailed not from the present, but from a memory of flashing lights and the weight of a badge against his chest. Before hunger, before betrayal, before 3 years of wandering led him here, to this place that reeked of fear and death. The German shepherd struggled to his feet. If today was his end, he would meet it standing. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Locals called it Dunning's Animal Sanctuary. But the weathered sign at the end of the dirt road concealed a darker purpose, just outside Pinewood, Georgia. The collection of chain-link kennels and corrugated metal sheds served as a clearinghouse for unwanted animals, some destined for illegal fighting rings, others for experimental labs that didn't ask questions about their test subjects. The German shepherd, once known by the call sign Shadow, had arrived 3 days ago. A truck driver found him collapsed by the highway and, seeing no collar, brought him here rather than to a proper shelter. At first glance, few would recognize Shadow as the same animal whose photograph had once hung in the Boston Police Department's K-9 unit hallway. His combat-ready 90 pounds had withered to barely 50. The glossy black and tan coat that gleamed in official photographs now hung in matted clumps, revealing patches of scarred skin underneath. 8 miles away, in the Whispering Pines trailer park, 8-year-old Lily Parker sat cross-legged on her narrow bed, counting quarters from her mason jar. The morning sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, illuminating her blonde hair and the small constellation of freckles across her nose. 27, 28, $40.50, she whispered, her blue eyes bright with determination. Just $9.50 short of the used bicycle at Peterson's Hardware. 3 more weeks of collecting cans and helping Mrs. Abernathy with her garden, and it would be hers. A clattering from the kitchen announced that her grandmother, Martha, was awake and making breakfast. The aroma of bacon filtered through the thin walls of the double-wide trailer they shared with Lily's mother, Sarah. "Lily girl, come get some breakfast before these eggs turn to rubber," Martha called, her voice carrying the musical lilt of deep Georgia roots. The trailer was modest, but meticulously maintained Sarah Parker's effort to create stability after her husband's military transport plane went down over Afghanistan 3 years ago. Family photos lined the walls, Lily's father in uniform, Sarah in her Boston police blues before she'd moved them south to be near Martha. Lily with missing front teeth holding up a fishing line. What none of them knew that morning was how one chance encounter would soon bind their fates to a dog that had once been a hero, then forgotten, and was now awaiting his final hour in a cage just a short bike ride away. The day that changed everything began ordinarily enough. Sarah had left for her morning shift at the diner, leaving Lily in Martha's care. But Martha's arthritis was flaring badly, the summer humidity making her joints swell until even holding a coffee cup became an exercise in endurance. "Lily, girl," Martha called from her recliner, "would you be a dear and run down to Wilson's store? We're plumb out of my pain pills, and I can't make it down there today." Lily tucked her savings jar deeper under her bed, "Yes, ma'am," she replied, already slipping on her worn sneakers. "You take the short cut through the back field, but mind you stay on the path. Don't you go wandering off into those woods," Martha instructed, pressing a $10 bill into Lily's palm. "And get yourself a popsicle with the change. Lord knows it's hot enough to fry an egg on the sidewalk today." The journey to Wilson's General Store normally took 20 minutes on foot. Lily made the trip often enough that each landmark was familiar: the crooked mailbox at the Hendersons', the massive oak tree with a tire swing, the drainage ditch where frogs gathered after a rain. But today, distracted by a butterfly with wings the color of sunset, Lily veered off the worn dirt path and found herself in unfamiliar territory. The butterfly led her deeper into the woods until the path disappeared entirely. By the time it fluttered up beyond the treetops, Lily realized with a sinking feeling that she didn't recognize her surroundings. Tall pines blocked the sun, making it impossible to determine direction. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the shade, panic rising in her chest. "Don't cry," she whispered to herself, remembering her father's words from long ago. "When you're lost, just pick a direction and keep walking. You'll find something familiar eventually." After what felt like hours but was likely only 40 minutes, the trees thinned, and Lily stumbled upon a dirt road. Relief washed over her until she realized this wasn't the main road to town, but some forgotten back route. Following it seemed better than returning to the woods, so she pressed on, the gravel hot through the thin soles of her shoes. Around a bend, a dilapidated property appeared: Dunning's Animal Sanctuary. The place had a forbidding air despite the cheerful, if faded, paw prints painted on the sign. A chain-link fence surrounded a collection of kennels and small outbuildings. No cars were visible in the gravel lot. Approaching cautiously, Lily heard barking, some frantic, some barely more than whimpers. Curiosity overwhelmed caution. Perhaps someone here could give her directions, or at least some water. Her throat felt like sandpaper. "Hello," she called, pressing her face against the fence. No human answered, but the barking intensified. "Is anybody here?" A rusted side gate stood ajar, and Lily slipped through. The smell hit her immediately, a pungent mixture of urine, feces, and something else, something sickly sweet that made her stomach turn. Rows of cages lined a concrete pad, most containing dogs of various breeds. Some lunged at the cage doors, barking furiously. Others cowered in corners, their spirits seemingly broken. "It's okay," she whispered, though she knew it wasn't. Even at 8, Lily recognized suffering when she saw it. These animals weren't being cared for properly. Their water bowls were empty or tipped over, and many looked painfully thin. At the far end, in a cage set apart from the others, she spotted him. Unlike the other dogs, this one made no sound. He stood with dignity despite his emaciated frame, watching her with mismatched eyes, one amber, one clouded white. A German shepherd, or what remained of one. Something about his gaze drew her forward. This wasn't the frantic pleading or fear she saw in the other cages. This was a quiet resignation, a soldier preparing for the end. "Hey, boy," Lily whispered, approaching slowly. The dog's ears twitched, but he remained still, assessing her with an intelligence that seemed almost human. "Are you thirsty?" Finding a hose coiled against a nearby wall. Lily filled an overturned bowl and placed it near the cage. The shepherd watched, but didn't approach, even as she pushed the bowl between the bars with a stick. "You should drink," she urged. "It'll make you feel better." A voice behind her made Lily jump. "He won't drink from that." She whirled to find a heavy-set man in overalls watching her, arms crossed. "You shouldn't be in here, little girl. This is private property." "I'm sorry," Lily stammered. "I got lost in the woods. I was trying to get to Wilson's store." The man's expression softened slightly. "You're a ways off course. Wilson's is 3 miles that way." He pointed east. "What's wrong with this dog?" Lily asked, unable to contain her concern. "He looks really sick." The man shrugged. "Found him on the roadside. No collar, no chip. Looks like he's been on his own a long time. Probably got hit by a car at some point, too. With that eye. What's going to happen to him?" A pause. "We'll find a place for him." The man's tone suggested otherwise. "Today, might be. Got a fella coming who takes the ones nobody wants." Lily understood, even if the man wouldn't say it directly. She'd heard adults talk in euphemisms before, especially about hard things. "I want him," she blurted out. The man laughed. "This ain't a pet shop, kid. And that dog's half dead anyway. Wouldn't make much of a pet." Lily's hand went to her pocket, feeling the $10 bill Martha had given her. "I have money," she said. $10. $10. The man scoffed. That wouldn't even cover his food for a week. But as he looked at the dog again, his expression changed. "Though I suppose nobody else is likely to take him, skinny as he is." He seemed to be talking more to himself than to Lily. "Might be doing me a favor, saving me the trouble." Lily held out the crumpled bill, her hand trembling slightly. "Please." After a long moment, the man snatched the money. "Your parents are going to kill me," he muttered, fishing a ring of keys from his pocket. "And don't you tell nobody where you got him. You hear far as anyone knows. You found him wandering." The lock clicked open. The shepherd remained motionless, watching with that same dignified caution. "Come on, boy," Lily called softly. "It's okay now." Slowly, with deliberate steps that suggested pain in his joints, the dog emerged from the cage. Once clear of the door, he stopped and looked up at Lily. Then, to her astonishment, he lowered himself to the ground at her feet, his chin touching the concrete in what looked remarkably like a bow. A sound escaped him, not quite a whine, almost a sigh, and as Lily knelt beside him, she saw moisture in his good eye. "It's okay," she whispered, hesitantly touching his scarred head. "I'll take care of you now." The man watched this exchange with an expression of bewilderment. "Strangest thing," he muttered. "Almost like he understands." As Lily led her new companion away from Dunning's, she whispered a promise. "I don't know what happened to you before, but you're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you again." The dog padded silently beside her, his gait uneven, but his head finally raised, as if some long dormant spark had been rekindled in his broken body. Getting the dog home proved more challenging than Lily had anticipated. Though he followed her obediently, his weakened condition meant frequent stops, every 100 yards or so. He would sink to his haunches, breath coming in labored pants, his one good eye fixed on her apologetically. "It's okay," Lily assured him each time. "We can rest." She wished she had water to offer him, worried about his dehydration in the Georgia heat. The sun beat down mercilessly as they slowly made their way through back roads toward whispering pines. By the time the familiar trailers came into view, nearly 2 hours had passed. Martha would be worried sick. The dog's pace had slowed to a painful shuffle, and Lily feared he might collapse before they reached home. "Just a little farther," she encouraged, though her own legs ached from the long walk. "See those trailers? That's where I live." As predicted, Martha was on the porch steps, phone in hand, likely about to call Sarah in a panic. When she spotted Lily, relief washed over her weathered face until she noticed the skeletal animal trailing behind her granddaughter. "Lord have mercy, child. What in heaven's name is that?" Martha exclaimed, rising unsteadily from her chair. "He's a dog, Grandma. He needs our help," Lily replied, her chin set in that stubborn way that reminded Martha so much of Lily's father. "I can see it's a dog, though barely. Where did you find such a creature? And where are my arthritis pills?" Martha's voice held concern rather than anger, her eyes moving from the child to the pitiful animal now standing motionless in their yard. Lily recounted a carefully edited version of her adventure, omitting the part about giving away Martha's $10. The dog remained where he was, swaying slightly, eyes darting between the trailer and the surrounding area as if assessing for threats. "He was going to be killed today, Grandma. I couldn't leave him there." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. Martha sighed, her expression softening. "Bring him round back to the hose. That animal needs water and a wash before he sets foot in this house. And you best pray your mama sees this with a charitable heart when she gets home." The dog startled at the sound of running water, backing away with a low growl that seemed to surprise even him. Lily spoke softly, reassuring him. And eventually, he allowed her to rinse the worst of the dirt from his coat. As the water ran through his matted fur, something metallic caught in Lily's fingers, a small rectangular tag tangled in the fur near his shoulder. She carefully worked it free. The tag was military style, similar to her father's dog tags, which Sarah kept in a shadow box on the mantel. But instead of a soldier's information, this one read, "Shadow K9 7734, Boston PD." "Grandma," Lily called excitedly, "his name is Shadow, and he was a police dog." Martha limped over to examine the tag, her eyebrows rising. "Boston PD. That's where your mama worked before." She trailed off, studying the emaciated animal with new interest. "Well, he's come a mighty long way from home." That night, after a heated discussion with Sarah, "We can barely afford to feed ourselves, and you bring home a dog that needs a vet we can't pay for." Shadow was reluctantly allowed to stay on the covered back porch. Lily smuggled out her dinner roll and half her chicken, which the dog ate with careful, almost gentlemanly restraint despite his obvious hunger. When Lily crept out to check on him before bedtime, she found him standing at attention by the porch steps, staring into the darkness of the surrounding woods. "Shadow," she whispered, testing his name. His ears twitched, but he didn't turn. "You can sleep. You know, you're safe here." Finally, he looked at her, and in the dim porch light, his good eye seemed to hold the weight of 1,000 untold stories. Lily reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and rested her hand on his bony shoulder. "Good night, Shadow," she said softly. "Tomorrow will be better." It wasn't until Lily had gone inside that Shadow finally allowed himself to sink to the wooden planks. Even then, he positioned himself facing the yard, head erect, a sentry on duty. In his dreams that night, sirens wailed. Flashing lights painted red and blue patterns across the snow. His handler's voice, calm, steady, trustworthy, gave commands that Shadow obeyed without hesitation. "Good boy. Shadow. Find it." The scent of narcotics led him through a warehouse, past empty crates, to a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Success. His handler's, Thomas's, approval. The familiar scratch behind his ears. Then the memory shifted, as it always did, to that final night. The raid on the waterfront. The unexpected gunfire. Thomas shouting for backup. Shadow launching himself at the armed man aiming at his partner. The searing pain as a bullet found its mark. Thomas's voice, suddenly afraid. "Officer, down, K9, down." Shadow jerked awake, a whimper escaping before he could suppress it. The Georgia night was nothing like that snowy Boston evening, but the pain in his hip where the bullet had lodged felt freshly inflamed. The memory of Thomas's blood pooling on the warehouse floor the last time Shadow had seen his handler was as vivid as if it had happened yesterday instead of 3 years ago. The screen door creaked, and Shadow tensed, ready to defend despite his weakness. But it was only the grandmother, Martha, wrapped in a faded robe, moving slowly to avoid aggravating her arthritic joints. "Can't sleep either, huh?" she murmured, lowering herself into a rocking chair. "Old bodies remember every injury when the night gets quiet." Shadow watched her warily. In his experience, humans were unpredictable, some cruel, some kind, most somewhere in between. "I was a nurse in Vietnam," Martha continued, rocking gently. "Saw boys come in broken in ways you can't imagine, but it wasn't just their bodies needed healing." She studied him with knowing eyes. "You've seen things too, haven't you, old soldier?" Shadow maintained his vigilant posture, but something in the woman's gentle voice made the tension in his muscles ease slightly. "My son-in-law, Lily's daddy, he came back from his first tour changed, jumped at loud noises, couldn't stand to be in crowded places. The mind remembers what the heart wants to forget," she sighed. "He never got to finish healing before that plane went down." A long silence followed, filled only with the chorus of cicadas and the gentle creak of Martha's chair. "Lily sees something in you," Martha finally said. "That child's got a gift for finding the good buried in broken things. Gets that from her mama. Though Sarah's forgotten it lately." She rose laboriously. "Whatever you were before, you're Lily's dog now. That's a sacred trust. You understand?" Shadow didn't respond, but as Martha shuffled back inside, his gaze followed her with a new awareness. For the first time in 3 years, he allowed himself to consider the possibility of belonging somewhere again. The next morning brought Sarah's reluctant agreement to let Shadow stay until we can find his rightful owners or a proper home." Lily's joy was tempered by the knowledge that this arrangement might be temporary, but she threw herself into caring for her new companion with single-minded determination. Using the Internet at the public library, Lily researched the care of malnourished dogs. She spent her afternoons collecting aluminum cans for recycling money to buy the special food the websites recommended. Martha contributed her knowledge of home remedies, creating a salve for Shadow's various skin ailments from comfrey and calendula grown in her small garden. For his part, Shadow maintained a respectful distance from the family, never pushing for affection, but vigilantly watching over them, particularly Lily. At night, he patrolled the perimeter of their small lot before settling on the porch. During the day, he followed Lily at a consistent 3 paces behind, close enough to protect, far enough to show deference. "That dog acts like he's still on duty," Sarah observed one evening, watching through the window as Shadow accompanied Lily to the mailbox. "Maybe he is," Martha replied. "Some callings run deeper than circumstance." A week into Shadow's stay, as Sarah hung laundry while Lily and the dog played a tentative game of fetch in the yard, a battered pickup truck slowed on the road in front of their trailer. The driver, a hard-faced man with a jagged scar across his jaw, studied the scene with unexpected intensity. Shadow froze mid-movement, the tennis ball dropping from his mouth. A low growl built in his chest as he positioned himself between Lily and the road. "What's wrong, boy?" Lily asked, following his gaze to the truck. The vehicle accelerated suddenly, disappearing around the bend, but Shadow's posture remained rigid, his hackles raised. "It's okay," Lily assured him, though she felt a strange chill despite the summer heat. "He's gone now." But in Shadow's experience, threats rarely disappeared so easily. Something about the man's scent had triggered a buried memory, one connected to the night Thomas died. As he reluctantly resumed his game with Lily, Shadow knew with certainty their peaceful interlude was about to end. 2 weeks passed, and Shadow's transformation became the talk of Whispering Pines. The skeletal creature Lily had brought home was slowly being replaced by a dignified animal whose true nature emerged with each passing day. His coat, though still scarred in places, regained some of its luster through Martha's diligent brushing and the improved diet. He'd gained nearly 15 pounds, muscle beginning to rebuild on his once wasted frame. But it was the change in his demeanor that most fascinated the Parker women. As Shadow's physical strength returned, so too did glimpses of his training and intelligence. He no longer ate frantically but waited for permission. He responded to hand signals Lily hadn't intentionally taught him. Most notably, he performed a perimeter check of their property each morning and evening, moving with military precision despite his lingering limp. "That's a working dog if I ever saw one," remarked Ed Wilson when Sarah brought Shadow to his general store one afternoon. "German shepherds like that. They're not built for sitting around. They need purpose." Sarah watched as Shadow sat perfectly beside Lily at the counter, his eyes constantly scanning the store's entrance. He was a police dog in Boston, according to his tag, K9 unit. How'd he end up here? Those dogs are valuable. That's what I've been wondering, Sarah admitted. I tried calling Boston PD, but got shuffled around. No one seemed interested in a missing K9 from 3 years ago. Weird, Ed replied, handing a peppermint stick to Lily. You'd think they'd keep better track of their investments. Those dogs cost thousands to train. Later that evening, After Lily had gone to bed, Sarah sat at their small kitchen table with her laptop open to a Boston News article dated 3 years prior. Officer and K-9 partner down in drug raid gone wrong. The grainy photograph showed a younger, healthier Shadow, beside a smiling officer identified as Thomas Reynolds, 34. According to the article, Officer Reynolds had died of gunshot wounds sustained during a waterfront raid that uncovered a major heroin shipment. His K-9 partner had also been wounded but was expected to recover. A follow-up article, dated 2 weeks later, briefly mentioned that the K-9 involved in the raid had been retired from service due to injuries and trauma. No further information was provided about where the dog had been placed. "What happened to you after that?" Sarah murmured, reaching for her phone. "And how did you end up in a backwoods Georgia dog pound?" Her former academy classmate, now a lieutenant in the Boston department, answered on the third ring. "McConnell." "Mike?" "It's Sarah Parker." A pause. "Sarah. Damn. It's been, what, 3 years? How's civilian life treating you?" "It's treating," she replied dryly. "Listen, I need information about a K-9 that disappeared from your department about 3 years ago. Belonged to an Officer Thomas Reynolds." The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably. "Why are you asking about that?" Mike finally asked, his tone noticeably cooler. "Because the dog showed up at a rural pound in Georgia, half dead. My daughter rescued him." Another long pause. "You have Shadow. Are you sure it's him?" "Military tag confirms it." "What happened?" "Mike." "How does a valuable police K-9 end up abandoned?" "It's complicated." "Sarah, that case had some irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" Mike lowered his voice. "Look, there were allegations after Tom's death, questions about missing evidence, conflicting reports. The dog was supposedly placed with a retired K-9 handler in Vermont. If he ended up in Georgia..." He trailed off. "Someone wanted him gone." Sarah finished, the realization dawning. "He was a witness?" "Dogs can't testify." "Sarah." "No, but their handlers can. And Shadow was with Thomas that night." "What really happened on that raid?" "Mike." Another heavy silence. "I've got to go. Be careful." "Sarah, if you've got Shadow, there might be people who aren't happy about it." The line went dead. Sarah sat still for a long moment, processing the implications. The conversation had confirmed her growing suspicions. Shadow wasn't just a police dog who'd fallen through the cracks of bureaucracy. He was evidence that someone had gone to great lengths to dispose of. "You heard all that, didn't you?" she said without turning. Shadow stood in the kitchen doorway, his posture alert, his good eye fixed on her with an intensity that made it hard to remember he was just a dog. "Your partner was investigating something more than a simple drug deal," Sarah continued, speaking to Shadow as if he could understand every word. "And someone made sure neither of you could talk about it." Martha appeared behind Shadow, her nightgown billowing around her thin frame. "Talking to dogs now. Next thing you know, you'll be answering for him too." Sarah managed a weak smile. "Just thinking aloud. Did we wake you?" "These old ears still work fine." Martha moved to the refrigerator, pouring herself a glass of sweet tea. So, our shadow here's got secrets. Does he? Possibly dangerous ones? Sarah closed her laptop. I think someone deliberately lost him after his handler was killed, and now he's resurfaced here. With us. Martha sipped her tea thoughtfully. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Perhaps this is where he's meant to be. Or perhaps we're now in danger because of what he represents, Sarah countered. That truck that's been driving by the one shadow always growls at what if it's connected. You always did have a nose for trouble, Sarah, even as a little girl. Martha settled into a chair. But seems to me, having a trained police dog around might be just the protection this family needs, especially with you working those late shifts at the diner. Sarah glanced at Shadow, who remained statue still in the doorway. I don't know if he's still capable of protection. He's been through too much. As if in answer, Shadow crossed the kitchen with quiet dignity and positioned himself beside Sarah's chair, leaning gently against her leg the first time he'd initiated contact with anyone but Lily. The message seemed clear. I am still here. I am still able. Sarah hesitantly placed her hand on his head, feeling the ridged scar tissue beneath his fur. All right, partner, she whispered. We'll figure this out together. The following days brought a new rhythm to the Parker household. Sarah began researching Shadow's history more deeply, reaching out to former colleagues and compiling information about the case that had cost Thomas Reynolds his life. Martha continued her gentle rehabilitation of Shadow's physical ailments, incorporating stretches and massage techniques she'd learned during her nursing career. And Lily, oblivious to the potential danger, simply loved her dog with the uncomplicated devotion of a child who had found a kindred spirit. Shadow, for his part, seemed to draw strength from this new purpose. His limp became less pronounced as he patrolled their property with increasing vigilance. He no longer shied away from loud noises or sudden movements. Most notably, he began sleeping inside at the foot of Lily's bed rather than maintaining his sentry position on the porch, a sign that Martha interpreted as progress. He's starting to trust that he can rest without disaster striking, she observed. That's healing, plain and simple. One hot afternoon, while Sarah was at work and Martha dozed in her recliner, Lily sat on the porch steps reading aloud from her favorite book. Shadow lay beside her, his head on his paws, seemingly content just to listen to her voice. The most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or touched. Lily read carefully. They are felt with the heart. Shadow's ears suddenly pricked forward, his body tensing. A low growl rumbled in his chest as he rose to his feet. What is it? Boy, Lily asked, marking her place in the book. The familiar pickup truck appeared around the bend, moving slowly. As it approached their trailer, Shadow positioned himself in front of Lily, his stance widening, hackles raised. This time, the truck stopped. The driver, the same hard-faced man who had passed by before, stepped out. His movements casual, but his eyes cold and calculating. "Afternoon, little lady," he called, remaining beside his vehicle. "That's a fine-looking dog you've got there." Lily instinctively placed her hand on Shadow's back, feeling the vibration of his continuous growl. "Thank you," she replied, her voice small. "Seems familiar somehow." The man took a step toward their yard, and Shadow's growl deepened in warning. "Where'd you get him?" "Found him," Lily answered, remembering her promise to the man at Dunning's. "He was lost." The man nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Shadow. "Looks like a police dog I used to know up north. Same scar over the eye." Shadow's muscles bunched beneath Lily's hand, and she could feel his restraint like holding back a wave ready to crash. "Sorry to bother you," the man continued, his tone belying the apology. "Just thought I recognized an old friend. You tell your mama that Vince Harmon says hello. You hear, 'We're old acquaintances,'" as he turned back toward his truck. Shadow barked once, a sharp, authoritative sound that made both Lily and the man jump. It was the first time they'd heard him bark since his arrival. "Still got some fight in you, huh?" Vince muttered, climbing into his truck. "We'll see about that." As the pickup disappeared down the road, Lily hurried inside to wake Martha. Shadow close at her heels. The dog remained agitated for hours afterward, refusing to settle, constantly moving between windows to check the road. That evening, when Sarah returned from her shift, Lily recounted the encounter in detail. "He knew Shadow. Mom, he said they were old friends, but Shadow didn't like him at all." Sarah's face paled as she glanced at Martha. "Did he say his name?" "Vince Harmon. He said to tell you hello, that you were old acquaintances." Sarah sank into a chair, her expression grim. "I never knew a Vince Harmon." "But he knew you," Martha observed, her normally gentle eyes sharp with concern. "And Shadow," Sarah added, watching as the dog continued his vigilant patrol of their small living room. "Lily, I want you to stay close to the house for the next few days. No wandering off, even to Mrs. Abernathy's." "But why? What's wrong?" Sarah hesitated, weighing how much to share with her daughter. "Shadow's previous owner was involved in a complicated case. Some bad people might still be interested in him. We need to be careful until I figure things out." That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Sarah sat on the porch with her service weapon, something she hadn't carried since leaving the force, resting on her lap. Shadow stood beside her, both of them watching the darkness beyond the small circle of porch light. "I ran his name," she said quietly to the dog. Vincent Harmon, released from federal prison 3 months ago after serving 7 years for drug trafficking, arrested in a separate case from the one you and Thomas were working on, but connected to the same network. She paused. "He shouldn't know who I am. Shadow. I was never involved in those cases." Shadow's ears twitched, his good eye reflecting the porch light as he glanced at her. "Unless," Sarah continued, the pieces falling into place, "unless someone here is feeding information back to Boston, someone who knows I used to be on the force there, someone who discovered you're with us now." A breeze stirred the wind chimes Martha had hung from the eaves, their gentle tinkling at odds with the tension of the moment. "Thomas was investigating corruption within the department, wasn't he?" Sarah whispered. "That's why they got rid of you after he died. You were the loose end." Shadow made a soft sound in his throat, almost like agreement. The next morning, Sarah called in sick to the diner for the first time in 3 years. After Lily had boarded the school bus with strict instructions to come straight home afterward, Sarah drove to the county sheriff's office. Sheriff Jim Colson was a barrel-chested man with a no-nonsense attitude that had earned him the community's respect over 2 decades of service. He listened without interruption as Sarah explained the situation, from Shadow's discovery to Vince Harmon's appearance. "Let me get this straight," he said when she finished. "You've got a former police dog that went missing after his handler was killed in a raid 3 years ago in Boston. Now, a convicted felon with connections to that case has shown up here, showing interest in the dog. And you think there's a conspiracy involving corrupt Boston cops who wanted the dog gone because, what, he witnessed something?" Put that way, it sounded far-fetched even to Sarah. "I know how it sounds, Jim, but something's not right. Shadow didn't just wander down to Georgia on his own." "Dogs can travel surprising distances," Coulson replied, though his expression remained thoughtful. "But I'll check with the feds, see if Harmon's violating parole by being here, and I'll have a deputy drive by your place a few extra times a day." "Thank you." Sarah hesitated. "There's one more thing. The man who runs that so-called animal sanctuary where Lily found Shadow, has anyone looked into what's really going on there?" Coulson frowned. "Dunning's place. It's got the proper permits." "Why?" "Because it looked more like a death row than a sanctuary to me. Lily said there were dozens of dogs in terrible condition, and Dunning was willing to sell one to an 8-year-old for $10, no questions asked." "I'll send someone out there to take a look," Coulson promised. "In the meantime, keep your doors locked and your phone handy." As Sarah drove home, a light rain began to fall, spattering the windshield and turning the dirt roads around Whispering Pines into mud. Her mind raced with contingency plans. If Harmon was here for Shadow, or worse, for revenge against what he perceived as connected to his arrest, they weren't safe. But leaving meant giving up the modest security they'd built here, uprooting Lily yet again, pulling into their driveway. Sarah was surprised to see Shadow sitting alertly on the porch despite the rain. He should have been inside with Martha. As she hurried from the car, the front door opened, and Martha appeared, her face tight with worry. "Got a call from the school," she said without preamble. "Lily's sick. Some kind of stomach bug going around. I was about to call you when Shadow started acting strange, pacing, whining at the door." Sarah glanced at the dog, who was now moving restlessly at the bottom of the porch steps. "When did they call?" "About 20 minutes ago. Said they tried your cell first but couldn't reach you." Sarah pulled out her phone. No missed calls or messages. "I didn't get any call from them." Martha's eyes widened in understanding. "Oh, Lord." Sarah was already running back to the car, Shadow leaping in beside her before she could even open the passenger door fully. As she reversed out of the driveway, tires spinning in the mud, she caught a glimpse of Martha on the phone, presumably calling the real school office to verify. "Find her, Shadow," Sarah urged, her heart pounding as she sped toward Pinewood Elementary. "Find Lily." The rain intensified as Sarah's car skidded into the elementary school parking lot. Shadow was already pawing at the door before she could fully stop, his body tense with urgency. The moment she released him, he bolted toward the school entrance, nose to the ground despite the downpour washing away scents. Sarah flashed her old police badge at the front desk, technically no longer valid but still effective in emergencies, and demanded to see Lily Parker immediately. "Mrs. Parker," the secretary looked confused. "But you just called to sign Lily out early. Her uncle picked her up about 30 minutes ago." The floor seemed to drop from beneath Sarah's feet. "I didn't call. Lily doesn't have an uncle." The secretary's hand flew to her mouth. But he had ID, and Lily seemed to know him. What did he look like? Sarah demanded, even as she pulled out her phone to call Sheriff Colson. Tall, dark hair, scar on his jaw. He said there was a family emergency. Sarah didn't wait to hear more. Outside, Shadow had already circled the building and returned to her side, his posture communicating what words couldn't. Lily's trail led away from the school. Sheriff Colson arrived with 2 deputies just as Sarah was preparing to follow Shadow's lead. "We've got roadblocks going up on all major routes out of the county," he informed her, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "And an Amber Alert is being issued. You're sure it's this Harmon character?" "The description matches," Sarah replied, watching Shadow pace anxiously. "But I don't understand why. Lily has nothing to do with whatever happened in Boston." "Sometimes revenge is motive enough," Colson said grimly. "Does your dog have any tracking ability? Our K9 unit is tied up with a search and rescue on the river." "He was narcotics primarily, but he's been following something since we arrived." Sarah turned to Shadow. "Find Lily. Find her. Shadow." The German shepherd didn't hesitate. Despite his age and lingering injuries, he moved with renewed purpose, leading them across the school playground toward a service road that wound behind the building. Sarah and Colson followed, the sheriff radioing their position to his deputies. The service road eventually joined with a county highway, where Shadow momentarily lost the trail. He circled in frustration, whining softly before catching a scent again and heading toward a turnoff that led into densely wooded state land. "Jameson Wildlife Management Area," Colson explained as they returned to their vehicles. 15,000 acres of forest with dozens of old hunting cabins and service roads. If Harmon's familiar with the area, he could keep a hostage hidden out there for days. Sarah felt ill at the thought. "We need to get search teams in there now." "Already coordinating with state police and Forest Service," Colson assured her. "But that dog of yours might be our best shot at finding her quickly." They followed Shadow's lead in Colson's 4-wheel drive cruiser, the unpaved forest road quickly becoming treacherous in the steady rain. After 20 minutes of increasingly difficult terrain, Shadow suddenly stiffened in the back seat, a low growl building in his chest. "He's got something," Sarah whispered, as Colson killed the engine. 100 yards ahead, barely visible through the rain and trees, sat a weathered cabin. Beside it was parked the familiar pickup truck. Shadow's growl deepened, his focus absolute. "That's Harmon's vehicle," Sarah confirmed. Colson reached for his radio, but Sarah stopped him. "If we wait for backup, he might panic. He already knows we'd be looking for her. And if we go in without backup, we could be walking into a trap," Colson countered. Shadow's attention shifted between the cabin and Sarah, his training evident in his restraint, despite his obvious urgency. "I'm going," Sarah decided, checking her weapon. "Shadow and I will approach from the rear. You cover the front. If Harmon tries to run, at least one of us can intercept him." Colson didn't look happy about the plan, but nodded. 10 minutes. If you're not back, I'm calling in tactical." The underbrush was slick with rain as Sarah and Shadow made their careful approach, circling wide to avoid being spotted through the cabin's windows. Shadow moved with surprising stealth for an animal his size, staying low and stopping whenever Sarah did. From their position behind the cabin, Sarah could see a small back porch with a door. No windows on this side. She strained to hear any sound from inside over the drumming of rain on leaves, but the cabin appeared quiet. "Find Lily," she whispered to Shadow, who immediately pressed his nose to the gap beneath the door. His reaction was immediate, a tail wag followed by a soft whine. Lily was inside. Sarah tested the door handle. Locked. But the old cabin's construction was less than solid, and a firm push with her shoulder made the frame creak. Another push, and the door gave way with a splintering sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet forest. Shadow was through the opening before Sarah could stop him, a streak of wet fur moving with deadly purpose. Sarah followed, gun drawn, blinking as her eyes adjusted to the dim interior. The cabin was a single room with a small kitchenette and sleeping area. Lily sat on a cot against the far wall, her hands bound in front of her but otherwise appearing unharmed. Vince Harmon stood near the front window, a pistol now trained on Shadow, who had positioned himself between Lily and the threat, his teeth bared in a silent snarl. "Should have known that mutt would track her down," Harmon said, his voice eerily calm. "Always was too smart for his own good." "Put the gun down, Harmon," Sarah ordered, aiming at his center mass. "It's over! Sheriff's outside and backup is on the way." Harmon laughed, a hollow sound. "Nothing's over until I say it is. 3 years I've waited to settle accounts. 3 years thinking about how Reynolds and his dog ruined everything." Shadow's growl deepened, but he held his position, protecting Lily rather than attacking. Even now, his training held. "Lily has nothing to do with whatever happened in Boston," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "Let her go, and we can talk about this." "Oh, we're going to talk, all right." Harmon's eyes were cold, calculating. "About how Thomas Reynolds wasn't just investigating our drug operation. He was looking into who was protecting it from inside the department. Names, dates, evidence, all stuff he shared with his partner before the raid." His gaze shifted to Shadow, his four-legged partner, who was always present during those late-night sessions. The partner who disappeared conveniently after Reynolds died. Sarah's mind raced. "You think the dog can somehow communicate what he heard? That's insane." "Harmon." "What's insane is that some of Boston's finest were willing to kill a cop, but couldn't bring themselves to put down his dog. Instead, they shipped him off to be someone else's problem." Harmon's grip on the pistol tightened. "Now he's my problem. And so are you and the kid." A sound at the front door. Sheriff Colson making his move. Harmon's attention shifted for just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. "Shadow, take him," Sarah shouted. The command unlocked something primal in Shadow. 3 years of survival instinct, police training, and protective loyalty converged as he launched himself across the room with explosive force. Despite his age and lingering injuries, he moved like the elite K-9 officer he had once been, a controlled missile of muscle and determination. Harmon fired, the shot going wide as 80 pounds of German Shepherd collided with his chest. The gun clattered across the floor as Shadow clamped down on Harmon's forearm, driving him to the ground with a practiced takedown that spoke of countless training sessions. Sheriff Colson burst through the front door, weapon drawn, taking in the scene in an instant. "Police don't move." Sarah rushed to Lily, gathering her daughter into her arms even as she kept her gun trained on Harmon. "Are you hurt, baby? Did he hurt you?" Lily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Shadow saved me. He knew." Mom. As soon as he jumped in the car, he knew something was wrong, but the man had a gun. It's okay now, Sarah assured her, working to untie Lily's hands. You're safe. Shadow maintained his hold on Harmon's arm, growling whenever the man tried to move. Blood seeped through Harmon's sleeve, but the dog's bite was controlled, designed to restrain, not maim. That dog should have been put down 3 years ago. Harmon spat, grimacing in pain. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. The only trouble here is yours, Coulson replied. Handcuffing Harmon once Shadow reluctantly released his arm on Sarah's command. Kidnapping, assault, illegal possession of a firearm by a felon, you're looking at decades. Harmon. As Coulson radioed for medical assistance and backup, Sarah knelt beside Shadow, who had immediately returned to Lily's side. The dog was breathing heavily, rain and mud matting his fur, but his eyes were clear and alert, fixed on Lily with unwavering devotion. "Good boy," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "Such a good, brave boy." Shadow pressed against Lily's legs, his tail sweeping slowly across the dusty cabin floor. For the first time since Sarah had known him, he looked truly at peace, a warrior who had fulfilled his purpose. When the backup units arrived, they found a tableau that would later become legendary in Pinewood, a former police officer, her young daughter, and a battle-scarred German shepherd standing as one against a handcuffed man who had underestimated the bonds of loyalty and love. The rain had stopped by the time they emerged from the cabin, shafts of late-afternoon sunlight breaking through the clouds and forest canopy. Paramedics examined Lily while deputies secured Harmon in a transport vehicle. Shadow remained vigilant throughout, never straying more than a few feet from Lily's side. "Your dog needs medical attention, too," one of the paramedics noted, pointing to Shadow's left hindquarters where a dark stain was spreading through his fur. "Looks like he caught a bullet." Sarah hadn't noticed in the chaos. But now she saw that Shadow was favoring his left leg, the same one that had been injured 3 years ago in Boston. Despite the obvious pain, he had performed his duty without hesitation. "We'll take him to Dr. Wilson right away," Sarah promised, her hand gentle on Shadow's head. "Can you hold on a little longer, boy?" As if in answer, Shadow straightened, his posture reflecting a dignity that transcended his injuries. In that moment, Sarah saw him not as the broken creature Lily had rescued, but as the hero he had always been, a guardian temporarily separated from his purpose, but never truly lost. Sheriff Coulson approached, his expression somber but respectful. "Your dog just saved a lot of lives today. Harmon had enough firepower in that cabin to hold off a small army, and he wasn't planning on anyone walking away." He glanced at Shadow with newfound appreciation. "Never seen anything like it." "Neither had I," Sarah admitted, "until Lily brought him home." As they prepared to leave the forest, Lily knelt beside Shadow, wrapping her arms around his neck in a gentle embrace. "You kept your promise," she whispered against his fur. "You protected me, just like you used to protect your first partner." Shadow leaned into her touch, his good eye half closing in contentment. The path ahead would hold challenges, his wound needed treatment, and questions about the Boston corruption case remained unanswered, but in this moment, those concerns seemed distant. He had found his place again, his purpose restored through the love of a child who had seen value in what others had discarded. With the setting sun gilding the treetops, Sarah, Lily, and Shadow made their way out of the forest toward home. A family forged in adversity and bound by something stronger than blood, the unbreakable connection between hearts that recognize in each other a kindred courage. Dr. Wilson's veterinary clinic stayed open well past closing time that evening. The small waiting room filled with an unlikely assembly: Sheriff Colson, 2 deputies, Martha, who had been brought by a neighbor after Sarah called with the news, and, of course, Sarah and Lily, who refused to leave despite everyone's suggestion that she should rest after her ordeal. "He didn't leave me," Lily insisted, her small face set with determination. "I'm not leaving him." So they waited. The minutes stretching into hours as Dr. Wilson and his assistant worked to remove the bullet from Shadow's hip, a delicate procedure complicated by the presence of old scar tissue from his previous injury. Through the clinic's glass doors, they could occasionally glimpse movement in the surgical area, the veterinarian's focused expression visible under bright examination lights. "He's going to be okay, right?" Lily asked repeatedly, her voice growing smaller each time. "Shadow's as tough as they come," Martha assured her, though her own weathered face showed concern. "The Lord doesn't bring a soul through that much hardship just to give up at the finish line." Around midnight, Dr. Wilson finally emerged, surgical mask pulled down around his neck, his scrub showing evidence of the difficult procedure. The exhaustion in his eyes gave way to a gentle smile as he approached the waiting family. "He's a fighter, that one," he announced. "Bullet fragmented against the old metal plate in his hip, the one from his previous injury. Made extraction tricky. But we got all the pieces. He's lost some blood and he'll need significant rest, but with proper care, he should recover." The collective relief in the room was palpable. Lily burst into tears, not the quiet crying of fear she'd maintained throughout the wait, but loud, hiccuping sobs of release. Sarah held her daughter close, her own eyes wet with unshed tears. "Can we see him?" Lily asked through her sobs. Dr. Wilson hesitated. "He's still under sedation. Won't be very responsive until morning." "Please," Lily pleaded. "I just need to see that he's breathing." The veterinarian's professional resolve softened. 5 minutes. Then you all need to go home and rest. You can come back in the morning." He led them to a recovery area where Shadow lay on a padded table, an IV line in his foreleg, his breathing slow but steady. The proud German shepherd looked suddenly vulnerable, his powerful body rendered still. White bandages stark against his dark fur. His left hind leg was heavily wrapped, elevated slightly on a cushion. Lily approached carefully, her small hand reaching out to touch Shadow's head. "We're here, boy," she whispered. "You were so brave. The bravest dog in the whole world." Shadow's good eye opened halfway at the sound of her voice, a brief flicker of awareness before the sedation pulled him back under. But in that momentary connection, something powerful passed between child and dog, a wordless reassurance that transcended the sterile clinical setting. "That there's a bond that can't be broken," Martha observed softly. "Not by bullets, not by years, not by anything this world can throw at it." As they prepared to leave, Dr. Wilson took Sarah aside. "There's something you should know. When we were removing the bullet, we found something else lodged near the old wound, a microchip, but not a standard identification one. It's military grade, the kind used for sensitive documentation. Your dog was carrying something important. Sarah glanced back at Shadow. Can you extract it? Already did. It's a data chip, waterproofed in a special casing. Whatever's on it, someone went to extraordinary lengths to make sure it survived. He handed Sarah a small plastic container with what looked like a black memory card no bigger than her thumbnail. I don't have the equipment to read it, but I suspect you know people who might. Sarah closed her fingers around the container, the final piece of the puzzle suddenly clear. His handler didn't just treat Shadow as a partner. He used him as a secure transport, a living safe for evidence that corrupt officers couldn't find in a standard search. And someone figured it out after the handler died. Dr. Wilson concluded. Explains why they didn't want to risk an autopsy on the dog, and why they tried to make him disappear instead. The implications were staggering. For 3 years, Shadow had carried within his body the evidence that could potentially expose a network of corruption surviving abandonment, starvation, and abuse, guided by some inexplicable instinct toward the one person who had been connected to his former life, Sarah, Thomas Reynolds' academy classmate. The next morning brought rain again, a gentle summer shower that washed the world clean after the previous day's drama at the veterinary clinic. Shadow was awake but groggy, his good eye brightening visibly when Lily entered his recovery room. His tail thumped weakly against the examination table in greeting. The doctor says you have to stay here a few more days, Lily informed him seriously, settling onto a stool beside him. But I'm going to visit every day, and when you come home, I have a surprise for you. Sarah watched from the doorway as her daughter proceeded to read aloud from The Little Prince, the book she'd been sharing with Shadow before the kidnapping. The dog's attention remained fixed on Lily, his ears moving slightly with the cadence of her voice, as if understanding every word. Dr. Wilson approached with Shadow's morning medication. Never seen anything like it, he commented quietly to Sarah. Most dogs with his level of injury would be whimpering, demanding attention. He just lies there, dignified as can be, like he knows exactly what's happening and is determined not to make a fuss. He was trained to endure, Sarah replied, her voice tinged with both admiration and sadness, to put the mission above his own comfort. Well, his mission now is to heal, the veterinarian said firmly, and to be the family guardian he clearly wants to be. Later that day, Sarah drove to the sheriff's office with the microchip secured in an evidence bag. Sheriff Colson listened intently as she explained her theory about Shadow's role as an unwitting courier of evidence. If what's on this chip is as significant as we think, it needs to go straight to the FBI, Colson advised. This is way beyond local jurisdiction, especially if it involves police corruption in another state. 2 FBI agents arrived from Atlanta by nightfall. The data extraction was performed in Colson's office, the contents appearing on his computer screen: financial records, photographs, recorded conversations, a meticulous documentation of police officers facilitating drug shipments, taking payoffs, and ultimately planning the elimination of Thomas Reynolds when he got too close to the truth. Officer Reynolds suspected he was being watched, one of the agents explained as they reviewed the material. So he created this backup of his investigation and concealed it in the one partner he knew couldn't be compromised. And then they killed him for it, Sarah said quietly. Yes, but they couldn't find the evidence, and apparently they couldn't bring themselves to kill a decorated K-9 officer outright too many questions. So they arranged for him to disappear instead. The agent shook his head in disbelief. They never imagined the dog would survive long enough to be found, let alone end up with someone connected to the case. Shadow didn't just survive, Sarah corrected. He completed his mission. His last assignment from his handler was to protect this evidence. And that's exactly what he did for 3 years. Against impossible odds. As she drove home that evening, the weight of Shadow's journey settled fully on Sarah's shoulders. The dog hadn't simply been abandoned. He had been carrying a burden none of them could have imagined. His appearance in their lives wasn't coincidence, but the culmination of an extraordinary act of loyalty, a final service to a partner long gone, but never forgotten. The revelation of Shadow's hidden purpose sent ripples far beyond Pinewood. Within days, federal agents descended on the Boston Police Department, executing search warrants and conducting interviews that sent shockwaves through the ranks. 3 senior officers were placed on administrative leave, then formally arrested as the evidence from Shadow's microchip was corroborated by additional sources that emerged once the investigation gained momentum. For the Parker family, the aftermath brought unexpected challenges. News vans appeared at the end of their dirt driveway, reporters eager to capture the story of the heroic K-9 who had carried crucial evidence across state lines, and the little girl who had saved him from death row. Sarah fielded calls from national media outlets, police associations, and even a book publisher, all while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy for Lily's sake. Through it all, their focus remained on Shadow's recovery. After 5 days at Dr. Wilson's clinic, the German Shepherd was cleared to return home, though with strict instructions for limited movement and regular medication. His homecoming was subdued compared to the media circus that had begun to surround his story, just 3 humans waiting on the porch steps of their modest trailer. Martha having baked Shadow's favorite peanut butter biscuits for the occasion. As Sarah helped him from the car, Shadow moved with the careful dignity of a soldier returning from battle wounded but unbowed. His leg was still heavily bandaged, but his eyes were clear and alert, taking in the familiar surroundings of the place that had become his sanctuary. When he reached the bottom of the porch steps, he paused, looking up at the short climb with what seemed like uncertainty. "It's okay, boy," Lily encouraged from the top step. "Take your time." Instead of attempting the stairs, Shadow lowered himself to the ground, his chin resting on his paws in what appeared to be defeat. Sarah started to move to help him, but Martha held her back with a gentle hand. "Some journeys a soul's got to make on their own," she murmured. "Even if it's just 3 steps. For long moments, Shadow remained motionless, his breathing steady but labored. Then, with visible effort, he pushed himself up again. 1 step at a time, he navigated the short climb, each movement deliberate and clearly painful. When he finally reached the top, Lily wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. "You did it," she whispered. "I knew you would." Inside, they had prepared a comfortable bed in the living room, an old mattress covered with blankets positioned where Shadow could see both the front door and Lily's bedroom. He settled onto it with a deep sigh, his body relaxing as if recognizing he was truly home. That evening, as Lily sat beside Shadow, reading her book aloud, a knock at the door announced the arrival of Sheriff Colson and a man Sarah didn't recognize, tall, distinguished, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "Sarah, this is Director Phillips from the FBI's Criminal Investigation Division." Colson introduced them. He wanted to meet Shadow personally. The director's eyes moved to the German Shepherd, who had raised his head at the entrance of strangers. "So, this is the hero of the hour," he said, his voice carrying genuine respect. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward Shadow. Sarah nodded, watching carefully as the director approached and knelt beside the dog's bed. Shadow regarded him with cautious interest, but allowed the man to place a hand gently on his head. "In 30 years with the Bureau, I've never seen anything quite like this," Phillips admitted. "The evidence he preserved has already led to 5 arrests in Boston, with more likely to follow. We're looking at one of the most significant police corruption cases in recent history. He was just doing what he was trained to do," Sarah replied, "being loyal to his partner. That kind of loyalty deserves recognition." Phillips reached into his jacket and withdrew a small box, which he opened to reveal a metal gold, inscribed with the FBI seal. "This is the FBI Medal for Meritorious Achievement. It's usually reserved for agents who display exceptional courage in the line of duty. The director authorized this special presentation for Shadow." Lily's eyes widened as Phillips carefully affixed the medal to Shadow's collar. "Does this mean he's an FBI dog now?" Phillips smiled. "It means he's being honored for completing one of the longest and most important missions in law enforcement history." He looked directly at Shadow. "Consider yourself officially retired, officer, with full honors." Shadow seemed to understand the solemnity of the moment, holding perfectly still until the medal was secured, then lowering his head in what could almost be interpreted as a bow of acknowledgement. After the officials departed, Lily examined the medal with reverent fingers. "See, Shadow, everyone knows you're a hero now." That night, for the first time since joining their household, Shadow slept deeply without positioning himself on guard. The vigilance that had kept him alive for 3 years and had saved Lily's life gave way to a profound exhaustion as his body finally surrendered to healing. In the morning, Sarah received another visitor, this one unexpected and unwelcome. The man from Dunning's sanctuary stood awkwardly on their porch, hat in hands, shifting nervously under Sarah's cold stare. "I heard about what happened," he began, unable to meet her eyes. "About the dog being a police K-9 and all. I just wanted to say, you sold a starving injured service animal to an 8-year-old child for $10. Sarah interrupted, her voice low but sharp. "An animal that had served his country and been deliberately abandoned. There's nothing you can say that makes that right." The man nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I know. That's why I'm here. Sheriff's office has shut down my operation, rightfully so. I was cutting corners, looking the other way when I shouldn't." He finally looked up. "But I brought something that might help." From his truck, he retrieved a large bag of premium dog food and a worn leather object that Sarah recognized immediately, a police K-9 harness, the kind used during official duties. Found it tangled in his fur when he was brought in. Didn't think much of it at the time. Figured it was just an old piece of equipment someone had used on him. He held out the harness, the Boston PD K-9 unit insignia still visible despite years of wear. Thought he might want it back. Sort of a piece of his history, you know. Sarah accepted the harness, surprised by the rush of emotion she felt at holding this tangible connection to Shadow's former life. "Thank you," she said, her tone softening slightly. "This does mean something." After the man left, Sarah brought the harness inside, where Shadow was resting on his bed. His reaction was immediate and powerful. At the sight and scent of the familiar equipment, he struggled to his feet, tail wagging with more energy than they had seen since his injury, his nose eagerly investigating every inch of the leather. "You remember this, don't you?" Sarah said softly, watching as Shadow pressed his muzzle against the harness with what could only be described as reverence. "From your days with Thomas." Lily, witnessing this reunion, had a sudden inspiration. "Mom, can we hang it up, like Daddy's uniform, so Shadow can see it every day?" That afternoon, Sarah created a small display on the living room wall. Shadow's original K9 unit tag, his harness, and beneath them, a photograph the FBI had provided of Shadow and Officer Thomas Reynolds at their academy graduation. Shadow watched the entire process from his bed, his eyes never leaving the items that represented his former partner and purpose. As Sarah stepped back to assess her work, she noticed something she had missed before: a small leather pouch sewn into the inside of the harness, hidden in the lining. Curious. She worked it open with careful fingers and extracted a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. The handwriting was neat but hurried, as if written in haste. "If you're reading this, something has happened to me. Trust no one in the department except Captain Reeves. Shadow carries everything needed to finish what we started. Keep him safe. He'll know who to trust. Thomas." Sarah stared at the note, then at Shadow, who watched her with calm, knowing eyes. All this time, he hadn't just been carrying evidence, he had been carrying his handler's final instructions, waiting for the right person to find them. "He knew," Sarah whispered, kneeling beside Shadow's bed. "Thomas knew he was in danger, and he prepared for the worst. You weren't just abandoned, Shadow. You were sent on a mission." Martha, who had been observing from the kitchen doorway, nodded slowly. "The Lord works in mysterious ways. That dog didn't wander into Georgia by accident, and he sure didn't end up at that pound by chance. Some things are just meant to be." As the sun set over Whispering Pines that evening, casting long shadows through the trailer windows, Sarah watched her daughter curled up asleep against Shadow's side. The German shepherd remained awake, his vigilant gaze moving periodically between the door and the sleeping child, a guardian now by choice rather than training. The journey wasn't over. There would be testimony to give as the corruption case proceeded, decisions to make about their future, and Shadow's continued recovery to manage. But for the first time since Thomas Reynolds's death 3 years earlier, his final mission was no longer in jeopardy. The evidence was secure. Justice was in motion. And most importantly, Shadow had found not just a home, but a purpose worthy of his remarkable spirit. In the soft lamplight, the FBI medal gleamed against Shadow's collar, an official recognition of what the Parker family had known from the beginning, that within the broken body of a discarded dog lived the heart of a true hero, whose loyalty transcended abandonment, abuse, and even death itself. 1 year later, on a bright autumn morning, the Parker family's modest trailer had been replaced by a small but comfortable house on the outskirts of Pinewood. The reward money from the FBI's successful prosecution of the Boston corruption ring, along with a settlement from the Boston Police Department for the wrongful treatment of their K-9 officer, had provided them with financial security for the first time since Lily's father died. Shadow lay on the front porch, his powerful frame fully restored to health, though the silver streaks around his muzzle betrayed his advancing years. The past 12 months had transformed him from the skeletal creature on death's door to a dignified, if battle-scarred, guardian whose presence commanded respect throughout the community. His injured hip would never be perfect. He still moved with a slight limp after too much exertion, but Dr. Wilson declared his recovery nothing short of miraculous. Inside the house, Sarah prepared for their special visitors, straightening the framed newspaper articles and commendations that lined what Lily called their shadow wall. The story had captured national attention. Starving police dog's incredible journey exposes major corruption ring, complete with before and after photos that still brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Beside these hung Shadow's formal portrait in his restored K-9 harness, the FBI medal gleaming against his black fur. "They're here," Lily called from the porch, now 10 years old and taller than when she'd first discovered Shadow in that dreadful cage. She had grown into a confident child with a passionate interest in animal welfare, a future veterinarian. According to her current career plans, Sarah joined them outside as a black SUV with government plates pulled into their driveway. Shadow rose to his feet, alert but relaxed, his tail wagging in recognition as Director Phillips emerged from the passenger side. "Mrs. Parker, Lily," Phillips greeted them warmly. "And Officer Shadow, looking better than ever." The back door opened to reveal a woman in a wheelchair, Captain Diana Reeves, the sole officer Thomas Reynolds had trusted within the Boston Department. After testifying against her corrupt colleagues, she had suffered a retaliatory attack that left her paralyzed from the waist down, but her spirit remained unbroken. Beside her stood Thomas Reynolds' elderly mother, Margaret, who had traveled from Michigan for this day. "So, this is him," Margaret Reynolds said softly, as Shadow approached her with gentle dignity. "Tommy's partner." Shadow stopped before her, then did something that brought gasps from everyone watching. He lowered himself in the formal police K-9 bow that he had been trained to perform for distinguished visitors. Despite his stiff hip, the movement was executed with perfect precision. Margaret knelt with difficulty, her aged hands framing Shadow's face. "You completed his mission," she whispered. "My son would be so proud." The occasion for their gathering was bittersweet. The dedication of a memorial to Officer Thomas Reynolds and the other officers who had died exposing the corruption within the Boston Police Department. The small stone monument now stood in Pinewoods Community Park, a reminder of sacrifice and courage that transcended state lines. The ceremony was modest but meaningful. Sheriff Colson spoke about integrity and law enforcement. Director Phillips discussed the historic impact of the case. Captain Reeves shared memories of Thomas as a dedicated officer who refused to look the other way when he discovered wrongdoing within the ranks. Throughout the speeches, Shadow sat at attention beside Lily, the perfect embodiment of the K-9 officer he had once been. Only those who knew him well would notice the protective glances he occasionally cast toward Lily, or the way he leaned slightly against her leg, his way of reassuring her that he remained on duty. When it came time for the unveiling, Margaret Reynolds asked if Shadow could assist. With a gentle command from Sarah, "Shadow, help," The German shepherd took the attached ribbon carefully in his teeth and pulled, drawing back the covering to reveal the polished stone with its simple inscription, "In honor of Officer Thomas Reynolds and his canine partner Shadow, whose loyalty revealed truth and whose courage protected justice. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." As the small crowd applauded, Shadow returned to Lily's side, accepting her embrace with dignified patience. For him, the ceremony was less important than the people he had sworn to protect, particularly this small human who had seen value in him when he was at his lowest. After the dedication, they gathered at the Parker home for a simple reception. Martha's famous peach cobbler was served alongside iced tea and coffee, the conversation flowing easily between people connected by extraordinary circumstances. In a quiet moment, Captain Reeves found Sarah alone in the kitchen. "There's something you should know," she said, her voice low. "The internal investigation uncovered evidence that Shadow wasn't just abandoned after Thomas died. He was deliberately transported across state lines and released in rural Georgia, specifically chosen because it has one of the highest rates of stray euthanasia in the country." Sarah stilled, the information hitting her like a physical blow. They wanted to ensure he'd die without being identified. Reeves nodded. But they underestimated two things: Shadow's will to survive, and fate's way of bringing justice full circle. She glanced through the doorway to where Shadow lay beside Lily in the living room. "Thomas always said that dog was special, that he understood things on a different level. I think he was right." Later that evening, after their guests had departed and Lily had gone to bed, Sarah sat on the porch steps with Shadow beside her. The night was clear, stars sprawling across the Georgia sky in brilliant constellations. Martha had retired early, leaving them in companionable silence. "You know, sometimes I wonder if you understand everything that's happened," Sarah mused, her hand resting lightly on Shadow's back. "How close you came to the end. How many lives you've touched." Shadow leaned against her, his solid warmth reassuring in the cool evening air. "Thomas would be proud of you," she continued, "completing the mission, protecting Lily, bringing his killers to justice, above and beyond the call of duty. Officer." At the mention of his former title, Shadow's ears perked forward, his posture straightening almost imperceptibly, muscle memory from years of service. Sarah smiled. "At ease, Shadow. You're off duty now." But they both knew that wasn't entirely true. Shadow's vigilance never fully disappeared. It had simply transformed from professional obligation to personal commitment. His territory had contracted from the streets of Boston to the boundaries of the Parker property, his charges reduced from the general public to one small family. But the dedication remained unchanged, 3 times a week. Shadow and Lily visited the Pinewood Children's Hospital, where Shadow now served as a certified therapy dog. His gentle patience with sick and injured children had made him a favorite among staff and patients alike. The former police K-9, who had once tracked dangerous criminals, now specialized in bringing smiles to the faces of children fighting their own battles, a repurposing of his training that seemed to fulfill him in ways no one had anticipated. Dr. Wilson, who had overseen Shadow's therapy certification, often remarked that he'd never seen an animal so intuitive about human needs. "He knows which kids need physical comfort and which ones just need quiet presence," he'd observed, can't teach that kind of empathy. As the night deepened, Sarah's thoughts turned to the journey that had brought them here, from Lily's impulsive rescue of a starving dog to the unraveling of a criminal conspiracy that had claimed multiple lives. Through it all, Shadow had been both catalyst and anchor, his unwavering loyalty a reminder of the best qualities humans could aspire to. "Come on, boy," she said finally, rising from the steps. "Let's get some rest." Inside, Sarah paused at Lily's doorway, checking on her daughter as she did every night. She found Shadow already there, having slipped silently past her to assume his customary position at the foot of Lily's bed. He looked up as Sarah entered, his good eye catching the hallway light. "Standing guard," she whispered with a smile. Shadow's tail thumped once against the bedspread, an affirmative response. In the soft glow of Lily's nightlight, Sarah could see that his body was positioned strategically between the sleeping child and the bedroom door, his head raised in alert watchfulness. "Good night, Shadow," Sarah murmured, understanding that no matter how many years passed, some aspects of his nature would never change. "Good job today." As she closed the door, she heard the gentle rustle of Shadow settling more comfortably on the bed, secure in the knowledge that his family was safe for another night. The mission Thomas Reynolds had entrusted to him was complete. But Shadow had found a new purpose, one that would sustain him for whatever years remained of his remarkable life. Outside, the stars continued their silent vigil, witness to the extraordinary bond between a once-abandoned dog and the child who had recognized the hero beneath his broken exterior. Their story had already inspired changes in canine officer protection laws in 3 states, with pending legislation named Shadow's Law that would classify abandonment or mistreatment of police service animals as a felony offense. In this way, the ripples of one small act of compassion, a little girl spending her bicycle money to save a starving dog, continued to spread outward, touching countless lives with the enduring message that even in the darkest moments, courage and loyalty could light the way forward to a brighter dawn. In a world that too often forgets its heroes, Shadow's journey reminds us of what truly matters. Remember when loyalty meant something, when a handshake sealed a promise, and duty wasn't just a word, but a sacred commitment. This German Shepherd embodied values that seem increasingly rare: unwavering dedication, resilience through unspeakable hardship, and the courage to stand tall when it would have been easier to surrender. Like many of us who've weathered life's storms, Shadow carried invisible wounds alongside his physical scars. Yet he persisted. When that innocent child saw worth in what others had discarded, she reflected the America we grew up believing in, one where second chances were possible and where character outweighed circumstance. Shadow's story speaks to everyone who's ever felt overlooked or pushed aside after years of faithful service. It honors those who've stood guard, whether in uniform or in family homes, protecting what matters most without expectation of reward. As we reflect on our own journeys, perhaps we recognize something of ourselves in this battle-worn protector who found his purpose renewed through the simple, pure